Hey, this is Andrew Brown. I want to get you set up programmatically for how we're going to work with specifically AI services. So, when we're working with AI services, I like to work in Jupyter Notebooks because I think that has the most synergy for development. And so, technically, VS Code can run notebooks. And so, we could do it locally, we could do it in GitHub code spaces. But where I'm going to do it is I'm going to do it in a notebook within Azure Machine Learning Studio. Now, Azure AI Studio, which right now is still in preview, has the ability to launch notebooks. However, it's just utilizing Azure Machine Learning notebooks underneath. And it actually makes it more confusing using Azure AI Studio because at this point, it's just not a well developed service. So I'd rather just save you the pain. And we're going to go ahead over to Azure Machine Learning. And what we'll do is spin up one here. And from there, we will then have our compute there. All examples are going to be up in the Azure examples repo. I just started this, so depending on where you come in, there could be lots here or little. But at this point, this is my starting point here. But I'm going to go ahead here and create a new workspace. So we'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead here and just say AZ or just say AI workspace. It could be AI or ML workspace, doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to call this my AI workspace. It could matter where we launch this. I'm going to launch this in maybe West US. The reason why is that when we're dealing with machine learning services, some types of compute or GPUs are only available in particular areas. I know, like when you're doing fine tuning, at the time of this video, they only appear in West US and Sweden. So I'm going to stick with West US. It's not normally where I would put things, but that's where we're going to put things here today. It's going to create a storage account. It's going to create a key vault. It's going to create application insights, which I'm not sure. I guess we do need it. We can't say no. And container registry, which I'm just going to leave blank. For networking options, we have public, private, private with approved outbound. Pretty standard for Azure services to provide 3 levels of network isolation. But this UI looks a little bit different than some other places. But we'll go ahead and hit review and create. And so we will go and create this Azure Machine Learning workspace. Okay, so I'll just pause here. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, so that was just the review stage. We'll go ahead and now create. I thought it was creating. Sometimes I think that it's creating when it's not, but it has to do with that combination there. So now it's deploying, and we will wait for that to complete its deployment, okay? All right, so that resource is completed. Let's go ahead and launch this here. So I'm gonna now go ahead and launch Studio. Now, launching Studio doesn't cost anything. So right now we aren't really worried about any spend with the exception of storage accounts and anything else that's collected there. Apparently there's a lot of preview features. That's cool. Wow, there is a lot of preview features. And that is very interesting. It looks like there's even stuff for Visual Studio Code. But again, I want to keep it simple and I want to work with an environment that is going to be easy. So over here we have environments and we have compute. I'm trying to remember which one it is. No, these are predefined environments, so this is not exactly what I'm looking for. But, you know, I want to just point out that when we start working with Azure AI services or OpenAI services, things might appear here as well. So just always double check this environment because it can get overlooked. But I think what we're looking for down below here is compute. And so here it says, get started with Azure Machine Learning Notebooks and R scripts by creating your compute instance. And so that's what I want to do, is I want to create a compute over here. So what is the cost for compute here? I do not remember, but they do have serverless instances, which is really interesting. If we go over here, managed serverless instances utilized by prompt flow compute session. Right now, I'm not super confident with that. I'd rather just stick with regular compute instances because that stuff is very clear. But I can see if I can look up pricing very quickly here so we understand what we're getting into. Now, we actually might, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to start clicking here because it might just tell us the cost. Oh, there we go. Okay. You know, sorry, I'm just used to using things like AWS where they do not tell you. So since the last time I used this is different, which is fine. But notice we have some associated costs. So we have 18 cents an hour, 28 cents an hour, 37 cents an hour. So it really depends on what you're doing. So if you are, working with something, you might have to have something and then spin it down. So you'll have to be mindful of how long you have this running for. But if we're doing AI, it's very hard to avoid any kind of spend. Notice at the top we have CPU and GPU. If we're using the Azure AI Services API, we aren't doing the compute. Who's doing the compute is going to be, it will actually be Azure itself, right? So we might come back here and spin up something that has compute attached to it. But for now, all I really want to do is I just want to work with CPU for general purpose, the lowest possible cost. Here, it looks like this is really low. Looks like there's also some other options. If we can go cheaper, I would love to do that. Because again, we're going to just use APIs for now. There we go. And so we wouldn't obviously want to do that for anything else, but when we're using APIs. But this is what I'm going to spin up here today. We'll go ahead and hit next. Oh, so it can shut down over time, which is good. I'm going to just put in 30 minutes here just in case. So that's really nice. Do we want any other options here? So configure security settings such as SSH, virtual network, manage identity for compute. Really depends on what we're doing. Right now, again, I'm just trying to show you that experience of spinning up one of these compute instances. But I don't think that we need to do anything here. Create a compute instance on behalf of another user. Well, we don't need it on behalf of another user. It's going to be us. Do we need to assign any identities? We might want to do that. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and just hit next. I don't need any startup scripts. And here we can add environments. So I guess if we create an environment ahead of time, we could attach one. I don't need any of these, so I'm just going to ignore them. So go ahead and hit next. We'll leave tags alone. And we'll just review what we have. So we've chosen the cheapest possible option. The compute name is called Azure 2. Not the best name. I don't like that name. I'm going to go ahead and just say AI compute. Since this resource can shut down, it makes me think that we can shut it down when we're not using it, which is great. We'll just say AI compute, AI API, managed API compute. Okay. And that way we know exactly what this is for. I don't really need single sign-on, but that is totally fine. We'll go next. I'm not going to add environment because I'm not sure what to do for that right now. And we're going to go ahead and hit create. And so that is going to create our compute. If you have a larger type of compute with GPUs attached, then it might take longer to spin up. This should not take too long. So I'm going to pause here. I'll be back here in just a moment, okay? All right, so now our compute resource is running, and we have a few options. The VS Code Web is the newer option, but I'm going to stick with Jupyter Lab. I'm going to assume Jupyter is just Jupyter Notebook, but Jupyter Lab is the more modern version of Jupyter Notebook. So we'll go ahead and open this up here. Again, this whole video is just to spin up a resource. So here it says Jupyter Lab is suggested. And so it's just telling us what is being included in here. And so what we're going to need is we're going to need some type of kernel. And so usually kernel appears up here, but I don't see it. So I'm trying to remember how we specify our kernel. Kernel usage is missing. So it's possible that we should have included one initially here, but we do have some notebooks like Azure ML and things like that. So let's try 3.10 SDK version 2. And so I'm hoping if I do this, it's going to add a kernel for us. So just say print hello world. And we'll run this here. And it runs it. So yeah, now we're getting kernel usage, which is great. And so that's what we wanted here, okay? So now that we have that, we are in good shape. And I mean, what we should really do is just make sure that we have API access. The way we can do that is just by testing some kind of API. So just give me a moment to think of some kind of like test case that we can do here, okay? All right, so I think what I want to do is I want to go ahead and, again, use some kind of AI service. Again, we'll probably do this at some other point, but I just want to have some kind of use case that we can test here. I think that working with text is always really easy. So a translator is not a bad idea. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a translator very quickly here. There are many ways that you can do this. One is making Azure AI services and utilizing it that way. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and use the translator separately here. And I'm going to place this into my AI workloads, managed workloads. I can keep this around because I might end up creating a bunch of these. I'm going to stick with the same region that the other one's in. So this one's going to be West US. And do we have, let's see, West. Can I type that? No. West US, there it is. I was getting confused because we had these ones at the top here, but I'm going to stick with West US. This is going to be my translator test. And all I really want to do here is I just want to make sure, well, I'm going to put some numbers here on the end. We just want to make sure that this works before we move on and actually do real things, because there could be permissions issues and I just want to get through that here and just make sure that it works. But since we're using the API, that shouldn't be an issue, unless we need some other thing that we need to download. And actually, I do believe there is something we need to download. So originally when I did this, this was the Exam Pro code, free AI-900. This content is now for both the AI-900 and AI-102. But for any of these, I think pretty much the first step was setting up some kind of install like this, right? So I just want to make sure that works before we do it. So I'm going to go back over to here and see if this is ready. It says it is. We'll go over to here. Sometimes they will provide instructions on how to implement this. If they don't, it's not a big deal. We can try stuff here, but I want to go over sample code. No, that's not what I want. Let's go over to Python. And I suppose this is one way that we could do it. But this is not using any kind of SDK. Okay, so not exactly how I would want to implement it. I want to make sure that we can do this probably the way you would implement it here. So we do have cognitive services. And so I don't believe that this name has changed, because it'd be very hard for us to change that. Sorry, Azure. But I'm going to go over here and just type in Azure Cognitive Services, and we're going to type in maybe GitHub. And so there is a joined SDK. Is there a separate one for the translator? Could be this one here. No, that's just an example. So we have Cognitive Services Speech SDK. Cognitive Services Speech SDK. So this is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the translator, right? And this one's Azure Samples, which is fine. But something that we might want to take a look here is let's just take a look at how they're loading this in here. Over to Python. And wow, they are just not providing the same information as they used to. Okay. So give me a second. I'm going to go look and see if I can find an SDK for this. So I can see that there is an Azure Text Translation SDK. I'm actually surprised that it's in preview. That might explain when we went over to here, it's showing us raw Python code. So, you know, again, not exactly how I would like to do this, but if it works, I guess we'll go ahead and do that. So, because this one's in preview, and I don't really want to show you something that might not necessarily be completed. You know what? We're going to do it. I think they're probably going to end up using it. So we'll go ahead over here. I'm just going to say dismiss here. We're going to paste this in here. And what I want to find out is if we're going to run into any issues. That's what I want to find out. Can we programmatically work with an API? I'm not sure why this is not copying and pasting. Copy. There we go. Right click, paste. Edit. Paste. What is going on? Paste, paste, paste. Hello. Copy, paste, paste, paste. Yes. Right click, copy. Paste. There we go. And generally when you install stuff, you're going to put a percentage in the front here. That tells the notebook to use a system command, which is pip. So let's go ahead and see if that works. So see how there's a little asterisk? That means it's thinking, it's downloading, and it is working. So we're able to install this. Again, just trying to make sure that we have everything that we need for this particular kernel, which is working with APIs. And so here it says install it, and then down below, we need to include a couple of imports. So here we have credentials and text translation. So we'll go over here and give this a go. And we can run that. Says invalid syntax. Well, I'm not sure how that could be invalid when we literally copied it straight from here. So let's go back over to here. And by the way, we can name these notebooks. So this one could be named something as Translator. So we have from Azure Core Credentials, import text translation client. From Azure AI Translation Text, import text translation client. Okay. So maybe they've changed the name of it. And this is the part where it's kind of risky utilizing preview stuff, right? Because if it's in preview, they might change the naming on us. And that's probably what's happened here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and go to GitHub here. When we have this kind of issue, what we can do is just take a look and see if anything has been changed. So it says Azure SDK for Python, text translation. So I guess they're all kind of grouped here together. And they're not really telling us what the import is here. So clearly there is the credentials here, right? And this kind of looks useful. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this on over. I wasn't trying to make this super hard, but apparently it's not as straightforward for the translator. So it's just my poor choice of choosing that service. And so we'll just put that up there. We can change this over to be Markdown. So that way when we click, if we click that, we can, resources here up the top, we can click through that and get back to that very quickly. So what I'm looking for here is the import statements, and they don't show, but they do have a sample. So let's go ahead and take a look here. And what's interesting is, like, obviously there's the docs, but you can't always trust Azure Docs. Sometimes the code examples are better, or you just have to experience it for yourself. So we have sample text translation languages. So that sounds really good because I just want something really simple. And here they're just saying import sample text translation client. So it seems like they've abstracted out the code. And here it says Azure AI Translation.text. So if we go back over to this one, so it's Azure AI Translation Text. And so it looks like maybe the syntax is supposed to be this period syntax. So let's go ahead and grab that. I have a very strong background in programming, so for me this is not too hard, right? But for you, if I wasn't here, I'm not sure how you'd handle it. Okay, so we'll go ahead and paste it in here, and I'm going to just fix the indentation. I don't think the order matters, but I'd rather have the core on top here. And let's see if we run this. Is this going to fix our problem? Run that. And so now we don't have a problem. So yeah, the documentation is not 100% correct. So here they are showing, I mean, well, this one has the period syntax, but this one doesn't. But then this one down below here is correct. So I think maybe what happened is that they just possibly made a mistake. Maybe that's our issue here. Okay, so if that's the case, I'd rather rely on maybe this one over here. And so here they're saying, once you do that, get an API key because you're going to need one. Then create the client using the API key here. So I'm just going to copy some of this in here. And we'll need to set ourselves an API key. We'll just say API equals this. And there's probably like a safer way to pass environment variables. I'm not very good at this. There's like a way to set nvars, but I always fail, so I just paste them in here. And I do apologize for that. Just be careful when saving your notebooks and that you do not expose that information. We'll try our best to try to pass it through, but we might have to just hard code them in here. So the idea is that we get back our credential object. We are passing credentials here, region to region. We aren't specifying the region, but everything is US West. So it'd be nice if we had an example of what that looks like, because sometimes they want a title case, sometimes they don't. But anyway, so that's the text translator. We go down below here. This is just telling us what supported languages there are. I just want to translate. So it looks like the way we translate is we are going to have this here. Actually, I'm just going to grab this whole code block because it looks pretty good to me. And I'm going to bring this down here and paste it in. I don't like that it's 4 indented. I guess this is defaulted to 4. But normally when you're working with something like Python, 2-space indentation is what you should utilize, but this might be set to whatever that is. And I'm not exactly sure where to change that. Maybe we type in tabs here, or spacing. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure where that is, but I'll have to just live with 4 space indent. It's not a big deal. But over here we have our target languages. So we have CS, ES, DE. So I'm not sure what CS is. That is Spanish. That is, I believe, German. So here I have this as a test. I'm actually going to switch this out and make this JP for Japanese, assuming that's what it is. So the idea is that it will take in this text, so our input text elements. I'm just going to write our input text. I just don't like the naming of it. And we'll just say langs, and this will be langs. And by the way, this is too small. Another thing I can do is try to bump up the font. I know when I originally recorded this, people were saying, hey, Andrew, this stuff was too small. So I'm going to go ahead and increase the text editor font size. If it would increase here. And this is probably the reason why I didn't do that, because it just doesn't work. So I'll just bump it up manually like this. There we go. And hopefully that is a lot more readable for you. I do apologize. And so we'll scroll on down here. And so we have this in here. I'm just carefully looking here. So this looks pretty good. So all we're missing here is the API key. So I'm going to go back over here, and I now need that API key. So on the left-hand side, I would assume that's going to be under something like called APIs. So let me just carefully look for that here. Keys and endpoints is probably that. So we'll click into this. And so we have ourselves some keys. So I'm going to go ahead. Oh, so it says West US. So that's probably what we want. So I said earlier, I'm not sure what we need to set for the region. So I'm going to go ahead and type in region here and do this. And then we'll need our API key here. So I'm going to go back over to here. I'm going to look at the first key, just copy it. Of course, do not share your keys. Do not save this stuff into repos. Be very, very careful about that. My repo is public, so I really don't want to do that. And so the key is here. I just want to make sure that it works, and then we'll test and see if we can get the environment variable to work, okay? So what I want to do here is I want to run this. So this is where we are now. This could have been one step lower here. I'm not sure why I did it in this order, but these both ran, so it's still the order that we want it to be. And let's see if this works. No problem so far. And this is the big question here is this going to work? So run this, and it's taking its time. Using 80% CPU, which is a lot for not doing much. And so here it's saying missing one required positional argument content. And so this could just be a change with the API. So instead of body, it might want content instead. It doesn't tell us underneath what it's utilizing here. So let's go back over to here, and let's go back to overview and look at the code sample, because that's going to give us an indicator of the parameters it wants. Because here it says body, right? But then down below here we have content. So we get the request body, and we are turning it into application JSON. we're turning into a JSON-fied string, and then we're passing on as content. So the question is, would this require this to be JSON? I don't think so. So I'm going to go back over to our environment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a guess. Sometimes you got to do this. I'm going to change this over to content. And we'll see what happens here. And it's saying keyword argument only 2. Missing required keyword. So does that mean that this is now 2, like this? We'll try this. So here, the request is not authorized because the credentials are missing or invalid. So we're getting closer, right? And again, I just guessed at what those inputs were based on my programmatic knowledge. But it is a little bit hard to figure out from here. And also from the documentation, it's not super clear. But we can scroll on down and take a look and see what they're doing. And they're just pointing to the sample repository. So they don't even really show you how to do it. They kind of leave the whole thing out, which is interesting. But now that we've gone down this route, I really do want to solve it. And so my major concern is like, do we have a permissions issue? What is wrong here? So just give me a second, okay? So one thought I had here looking at the keys is that we have the web API and containers, right? And so it's possible that these only work with these 2 methods. I would expect that what the SDK is using is the web API or the same underlying API. However, when we go over to here, we are seeing that it's using cognitive services to list out keys. So it makes me think that we need to use cognitive services to generate out a key. Cognitive services have been renamed to Azure AI services. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to back out here for a second. We're going to go to Azure AI services, which is actually cognitive services. And notice that we have this one with this logo, this one with that logo. I believe it's the same thing. I'm just going to double check and make sure they're the same. Azure AI services. That is the original logo. Yeah, and so this is what was originally here. It says cognitive services and applied services are now Azure AI services. So this is the old way of doing it. And then when you go over to here, where you're looking at, this is the actual Azure AI Studios icon, but they've just moved everything over here for whatever reason. And you can actually see that I have an Azure AI Services Hub from earlier. But the thing is that we want to have an API key. And so we have this. Is that going to create me a hub if I go over here? It is. Get access to OpenAI, Speech, Vision, Translator, Azure AI Services with a single API key. Quickly connect the services together to achieve more insight. So this is one way to do it, but the question is like, why can't I just use the standard key? So again, I have a lack of confidence here because I think this is actually going to spin up Azure AI Studio. So if we type in Azure AI Studio, I'm just going to make sure if that's separate here. Oh, okay, so this is Azure AI Services. And Azure AI Services is just a programmatic way to work with a bunch of these APIs with a single API. And when you spin up Azure AI Studio, it's going to do that as well, just create this indirectly. But I would really like to just work with this specific API. So just give me a moment, I'm going to play around, okay? All right, so I haven't really found a solution yet, but I'm going back to this example here because maybe if we can utilize this one and then we can rule out that, our key is fine, but maybe it's our code. So if we go here, it says insert my keys and region into the sample code, meaning that it should update down below here. I'm going to go ahead and copy the sample code. I'm going to assume that on copy, it's going to show me that information, right? And we'll go back over to here, and I'm just going to make a new one, a new notebook here. This will be Translator. Yeah, we'll stick with 3.8 Azure ML, which is fine. And we'll rename this as, I don't even think we needed Azure ML. We could have just done that with, we could have just done that with the standard one here, but we'll say Translator Simple. Okay. And we'll go ahead and just paste that contents in here. And so if we scroll on up, it didn't do the thing that it said it was going to do. So I'm going to drag this one up here. And I guess I'll just have to manually get these. Not sure why it's not working, but that's fine. We'll go over to here to keys. We'll copy this. And we'll paste this in here. So we have those two parts ahead. I know this is like a big detour, but sometimes it's just what you have to do to get things to work. So I'm gonna run this, and then this, and then it says your location. This is West US. So that is fine. I'm gonna go ahead and just bring some of these things up here, like the location here. Right, and we'll do that. I'm gonna just take these two lines out. We don't need that. And so the rest should just work. Let's find out if that works. From English to... I'm not sure why that's a problem. But I suppose what we could do is just put it on one line and maybe that will resolve the issue. My primary language is Ruby, not Python, but I know Python good enough when I need to figure it out, so we'll go ahead and try that. And maybe it's just expecting commas here. It really makes me think that Azure does not test their products. And so we are getting translations back. So this is working. So we have ruled out here that it's not our API key. It's something that we're doing over here. Now notice that this has from and to. So I'm wondering if that's also something else we have to specify here. It's also specifying API version. Here it has the content type, which is application JSON. It has body with text in the interior here, and then passing it along like that. So here it's not very clear what it wants. And so we obviously know this is in preview. So I think that that's okay if we can't solve it. But you need to know this is what it's like working with Azure products, the SDKs. If you do not have a programmatic background, you can find yourself being very frustrated. Even if you do have a programmatic background, you can have yourself very frustrated. And I just want to show you, I'm going to go over to Twitter for 2 seconds because I want to show you, before I started doing these recordings here, I had to say my positive affirmations, which is I will record Azure AI labs today. I will successfully make the labs. I'll be patient. And I will not doubt myself. And remember, sometimes Azure just doesn't work, even if you know what you're doing. So do not get stressed. And understand that it's challenging for me as an expert in Azure to work with this stuff, okay? But yeah, so the last thing I'd like to do here is I just want to see if we could load in this environment variable, the API via environment variable, because we really don't want to embed things this way, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do that. I know it's like OS Enron, so how to load environment variables, Python, Jupyter Notebook, because there's a specific way to do this. And I just need an example. And so I'm thinking here that the challenge is if we get into the environment. So the idea here is that we can open up a terminal, say new terminal, and then this terminal should be connected to our kernel, but that's not necessarily true because if we go over here, we could end up with multiple ones here. So there's a way that we could open this. I just want to make sure like we have a guarantee that we're opening this environment in the terminal. And so that's what I'm not 100% sure about. Just give me 2 seconds. You know what? I'm not 100% certain, but I'm just going to try and we'll do a test here and see what happens. Sometimes that's the best way to find out. So I'm going to import the OS like this. I know this seems a bit excessive, but I'm going to make another notebook here. We'll just call this env test here. So we'll say, I just need SDK version 2, even though we're not doing anything with the SDK. And I'm going to go ahead and just rename this, and we're going to call this env test. And so we're going to import our OS. We're going to grab this value here. We'll go back over to here. add that there. We'll say my test var. All right. And so what I want to do is go over to terminal here. Again, is there some way we can open this in a terminal? No. Okay, so we'll go over to here and we'll bring a terminal open. And so what I want to know is if I set an environment variable here, and this one's called my test var, and it's actually set. We don't need to, or we can do export like this, export. And then we'll do an equals. It will say hello world. Okay, so the idea is that we have that now. If we type in env my test var, didn't do exactly what I wanted, but that's okay. We can do echo $ my test var. There we go. So that is echoing out there. Notice it says Azure ML Python 38. So that makes me think that the kernel that it's using is not necessarily this environment test one, but we'll find out here in just a moment. So I'm going to run this, I'm going to run that, and notice that it's saying does not know what this is. My test var, my test var. So I would really like this to carry through, because that way we don't have to worry about accidentally putting this in our stuff and committing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to restart this kernel. Restart the kernel. And see if that makes any difference. We can also clear out our inputs here. So just clear all inputs here, restart, yep. I'll try this again, and then this. Doesn't know what it is. So another thing we can do is we can change the kernel. So I'm going to change this, and let's see if we can make it the same as this one here, right? And so what I'm hoping for by changing this kernel, that maybe we've set it here and it will know about it, because it's telling us Azure ML Python 38. So do this, we do that, and that doesn't work. So I would really like to know how to get this to work. So just give me a moment. I'm going to do some research, okay? So I didn't find an exact solution here, but another thing we could do is we could try to just run, we can try to set the environment variable using that magic command with the percentage. There's also a suggestion there's a kernel JSON file. I don't know where that is. I don't want to dig into that. So let's try this solution, because this might work, okay? So we have where it says percentage environment or set environment, and so we could do this. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this here. I'm going to go back over to here, and I'm going to go ahead and just say my test var testing. And I'm going to grab this. I'm going to make this above here on this line here. Does it need an equals in between it? I mean, that one has it for sure. I mean, this one has it as well, where it's environment, whatever, or with the equals. I'm more comfortable with the equals. I suppose you could do it either way. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say hello world. And we're going to run this. And so now I want to see if I run this. Will that work? Oh, it didn't complain. So we'll go ahead and here just say print API key, which is not what we're actually doing here, but that's fine. It's just a test var. And so here we can see our environment variable. Now, here's a question. If I reset this kernel, restart, is it going to retain that? So we'll go ahead and do this. Okay, and that's fine. So we'll go here. I'm going to skip this line. I can go here. It doesn't know what it is. So just understand, if you reset the kernel, you're going to have to set that again. And so that's pretty much the best solution I have here. So what we'll do, I'm going to go ahead and just go back over here. So it's really up to you, like whether you want to just remember to clear this out or to go through all that process to have a hassle there. But I'm just going to clear this, and I'm going to bring this over here because this is our failed attempt, but I still think the code is worth hanging around. So this attempt failed because the API is in preview and we could not find a working example. We were getting authentication issues despite using the correct API key. So instead, with Translator, it's recommended to use the web API code example. Okay, and so that's our thing there. I really want to have this in my repo, and so probably the last thing I want to show you is just like how you can bring in like a environment or workspace to work in. But I need to bring these into here, right? So I'm in GitHub, and if I press period on my keyboard, what that's going to do is open up github.dev, and this has no compute behind it, so I don't have to worry about any costs. And the idea is that I can just work with files here. And so I'm going to go ahead and just download these two files. I say download and download. I might just rename this one before I do that. So renamed, failed, and we'll download that one as well. And so I'm going to go back over to here, and then I want to bring them on in, okay? So we're going to go to our downloads here, and I'm just going to go and make a new folder here, and we'll call this Translator. And then I'm just dragging in these IPNPs. Now, one thing we really have to watch out for is this part, right? Now, I'm going to end up tearing down the service, so it's not a big deal for me, but I don't want this to be here, so I'm just going to it's like replace me. Notice it's printing it down below there, so that's not good either. So I just want to, whoops, take this out of here. And I want to clear out all the inputs. So I'm not sure. We can do a terminal now? No. Oh, yeah, that's what I thought. You can create a terminal but continue in the environment. Okay, that's fine. So I just want to clear out these inputs. I'm not exactly sure how to do that. Clear inputs from... I'm not sure. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to delete these. And I'm going to delete my local files that I just downloaded. And I'm going to go back over to here. And I'm just going to clear all outputs, okay? So we'll clear that one. And I just want to take this out of here. Okay, I don't want this in here. I don't want to print out the key. I'll go back over to here. And I want to make sure that's cleared. I'll just clear this one out as well. Clear outputs. Restart. There we go, good. I'm going to go ahead and download both of these again. And all I really want to use this for is to facilitate copying this over. So it downloaded one of them, but not the allow multiples. That's fine. And so now I have both of them downloaded. It's off screen, just so you know. And so I'm going to select those two here. I'm going to drag them on into here. I lost my folder, so I'll make the folder again, Translator. And then we will bring these, we'll bring these into here as such, move. And I'm just going to go commit these. So I'll just say Azure API Translator. And I mean, I suppose we did that translation. I never really paid attention to what the output was. So I'm actually just kind of curious. So I'm going to go back here and just undo this. So I was just curious, did it actually work? I think it did, right? So just say run, run, run. And we do have it, yeah. So we have these two here. Maybe this is not the Japanese. Oh, we don't have it in here, that's why. I wanted to see Japanese, so I'm just going to put it back in here. And that is not a valid target language. Maybe it can't do Japanese, I don't know. I thought it could do that. Well, that's totally okay. But anyway, we have that there. So this is now committed. So now the next question is like, imagine I want to work with that, that there. So normally on the left-hand side, there's a way that you could bring in you could load in a repository, but I'm not seeing it here. So, yeah, I'm not sure. But normally you'd have some kind of version control here on the left-hand side. And I'm thinking that this one's so simple that it just doesn't have it. And that's totally fine. Like, if all we want to do is bring them in manually, we can do that. But it says over here, Jupyter Lab development team is excited to have robust third-party extensions. Let's go ahead and enable that. Maybe that it's an extension that we need to enable. I'm not sure if we're even allowed to enable these here. I'm clicking it. Oh, I had to be patient maybe. So I'm just going to click that. I'm just curious if we can get source control in here. If we can't, doesn't really matter. But we'll find out here in just a moment. As I clicked it, a lot, okay? All right, well, I mean, I enabled this, but it never really reappeared. That's totally fine. So we'll just say that we achieved what we wanted to achieve here. I'm going to shut down all kernels. I'm going to shut down all terminals. And so we are done here for now. Just to keep this a bit organized, I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call this one Translator. And the thing is, I'm just going to keep bringing files over into here. And so I'll just keep backing them up into the this repo here, the Azure Examples repo on exampro.github.com. And so we consider this done. I just want to make sure that we go stop this workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and say shut down. And so we'll shut down this Jupyter Lab. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that it's shutting down this, but we'll just double check and make sure, and we'll refresh this. Is it shutting down? No. So I'm going to go ahead and click this. I'm going to say stop. And we're going to stop that. And so hopefully next time I spin it up, it works. I might just start this up one more time just to make sure that it still works. So I'm going to stop it here. We'll wait. And then I'm going to start it up. And again, just make sure that it comes back to its original state, okay? All right, so that is now stopped. I'm going to go ahead and spin this back up here. So we'll start it up again. I tried clicking here, but we have to hit start up here. And so we'll wait for that to start up. And I just want to make sure that, that I can open up that Jupyter Notebook again, or Jupyter Lab, and then we'll just stop it one more time. And then we'll call this video quits. All right, so that's running again. I'm going to go ahead and open up this in Jupyter Lab. And just see, what do we have? Do we still have our files? Do we have anything? So we'll just go ahead and say, sure, build. That's totally fine. So yeah, our stuff is still here. So we are in good shape. I just might make another subfolder here and call this AI, and drag this on over to here, just so it's a little bit more organized. And so we can call this done. I don't think we have to stop the workspace from here. Like in Jupyter Labs, we can just go ahead and shut it down here, or stop it, sorry. But the idea is that we now have this provision. We have a working environment, and this is what we're going to use for managed API compute. If we need any kind of specialized ones, we'll do that separately. But we'll consider this done, and I'll see you in the next one, okay? Ciao.